Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So tonight there's several issues that I want to talk about briefly. It's very late, but I figured that if I don't do it now, I may not ever get around to doing this hangout. So hopefully a couple of people will tune in. If not, you all will catch it later on tomorrow, or actually today. I mean, today is, a new day has started since it's after midnight. But I hope that you all can check it out later for those people who aren't going to be able to watch tonight. But there are several things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the shooting in Annapolis. As you all know, I live in Baltimore. That's not too far from Annapolis. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy. I want to talk about him retiring. I want to talk about the elections that took place recently, in particular an upset that took place in New York City, where you had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez win an election there. She won her primary, defeating a 19-year incumbent Representative Joe Crowley. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Ben Jealous winning the Democratic nomination for governor. And I want to just talk about the impact of those elections. And I also want to provide an update about the Antwon Rose case, share my thoughts about that. And also I'm going to talk about Maxine Waters. Recently, she's come under threats. People have threatened her because she made some statements about the Trump administration, which I will go into in a minute. But I just wanted to touch on these various different news stories briefly tonight. Just share my thoughts about them. Shout out to Elaine Lloyd. Thanks for tuning in. I know it's super late, but I appreciate people tuning in. So recently, there was a shooting at the Capital Gazette. 5 people were killed. 2 people were injured. The suspect has been arrested. His name is Gerard W. Ramos. He's a white male, 38 years old. He used a shotgun. He went into the offices of Capital Gazette, shooting and killing 5 people, again, injuring 2 people. Apparently, this man had a long-standing grudge with the newspaper. They wrote about a criminal harassment case against him. He sued the paper years ago. He lost that suit. He filed a defamation suit. He lost that suit. It was dismissed. And recently, we had this situation where this guy actually went to the Capital Gazette and committed this crime. Fortunately, the police arrived there within 60 seconds and they were able to arrest him and stop the carnage. So I wanted to talk about this. Elaine Lloyd said, I'm not showing my face. Yeah, it's so late at night, man. I was debating whether or not even coming on. But, so y'all just going to have to listen to my voice tonight. But yeah, so, people have been talking about this. It's another mass killing, another mass shooting. We've seen this time and time again in the press. We saw what happened in Las Vegas. We saw, this shooting that took place in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Every other day there's a new shooting, where multiple people are shot and killed. And, there's talk, people are mourning the deaths of these innocent people killed by these deranged gunmen. You have these people from Congress talk about the need for gun control. But at the end of the day, nothing happens. Nothing happens to stop this violence. And I think that that's probably going to be the case here, especially since this man used a shotgun. He didn't use an assault rifle. So people are going to probably, after a couple of days, forget about this story. And it reminds me of that song that Childish Gambino did, a.k.a. Donald Glover, where he's talking about This Is America, basically how this society goes on with business as usual after one of these shootings. The music continues, people keep dancing, and people keep forgetting about what has happened. And we have a repeat of the situation over and over again. And this is just a reminder of what kind of country we live in. We live in a country that is violent. We live in a country where These things happen all the time, and often in these mass shootings, the perpetrator is a white male, but they don't stereotype white men. They don't label white men. They don't judge all white men based on the conduct of these mass killers. But when it comes to black men, a black man commits a crime, automatically the entire black race is judged and criminalized and stereotyped and racially profiled. But when it comes to these white men that commit these heinous acts, they are judged as individuals. They are not called terrorists. If this was an Arab man or some Asian man or somebody else, the first thing they would have done was call that person a terrorist. This is the society in which we live. We live in a society where you have people like Milo Yiannopoulos encouraging violence against police officers. Well, not against police officers, against the press, encouraging violence against the press. And nothing happens. Like this man a couple of days ago encouraged violence against members of the press. And today he was asked about this issue, asked if he regret what he had to say. And he basically said that he doesn't regret what he had to say. And I will post links to these articles in the description box. This is one of these alt-right fanatics that receives a lot of praise in these right-wing corners and these right-wing environments. They praise people like Milo Yiannopoulos. And this is a guy that's basically condoning violence against the press. So you have that situation. While you have this Donald Trump complaining about Maxine Waters, I wonder what he has to say about this guy, Milo Yiannopoulos, encouraging violence against the press. And I doubt that Donald Trump will have much to say about this, because Donald Trump has constantly attacked the press, called the press fake news, talked about how the press is the enemy of the people and this and that. He promotes these ideas of, dictatorship, where you want to suppress the press. You want to target the press and attack the press. So these people literally have blood on their hands. This guy Milo Yiannopoulos, made these ridiculous and insightful type of, not insightful, but inciting type of statements about the press. And then you have this situation unfold. So this is a very terrible situation, another tragedy. And unfortunately, nothing will happen. Even when members of Congress have been victims of gun violence, Congress has failed to act. They have failed to do anything to create any kind of reasonable gun control laws to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening. But again, this is America, as Donald Glover pointed out in his song. So I'm going to look at your comments for a second, and then I'm going to proceed on. Shout out to Philip Scott. Shout out to Orlando O. And I see there's somebody else here making comments. They must be trolling because Elaine Lloyd is taking care of them. Elaine Lloyd said maybe there's a mental issue with white people, because, yeah, that's a question that should be raised when you have all these white men committing these acts. Like most of the time, when you have these mass shootings, it is usually a white man that is responsible for this. But no one wants to touch that. No one wants to address that matter. And no one calls it white on white crime, as Elaine Lloyd points out here. Anytime there's some violence in Black communities, the first thing they do is call it black on black crime. But that terminology, white on white crime, is never used. It's never used. So that's one thing that I wanted to touch on. And the next story deals with Justice Anthony Kennedy deciding to retire this summer. This is very significant because Donald Trump has the chance to completely reshape the Supreme Court. Justice Kennedy is a conservative, but he does tend to be a swing vote on some very important civil rights issues and human rights issues. So this is a very important moment right now with his retirement, because Donald Trump can reshape the Supreme Court. And on issues like affirmative action, Justice Kennedy has played a key role as a swing vote in favor of affirmative action. He's been a key vote in favor of the right to choose in this country. And, if he, once he retires and Donald Trump, if he appoints somebody that's far to the right, that could mean the end of affirmative action. That could mean the end of a woman's right to choose in this country. And this is just yet another reminder of how important elections are, because we, the people, indirectly elect the president, and the president appoints members of the Supreme Court. These Supreme Court justices are in place for life or until they decide to retire. And they have great power. They have the power to decide important cases that impact every aspect of our lives. So here we have a situation where we may see the end of affirmative action. We may see the end of a woman's right to choose in this country. And that's something that people need to reflect upon. That's the result of an election. You had Black people, these so-called Black power advocates on here telling Black people that their vote doesn't count in these federal elections, telling them not to vote, telling them to participate in the Don't Vote campaign. And now that we have a Donald Trump in place, they want to complain about Donald Trump. They want to complain when it's too late. They didn't do anything to try to prevent this man from being elected. And now this man has the power to elect or to appoint Supreme Court justices that will take away many of the rights that we take for granted. Many of us would not be educated if it wasn't for affirmative action. Many of us would not be doctors and lawyers and scientists and, other types of professionals if it wasn't for affirmative action. Affirmative action created an opportunity for our people to get higher education, to have access to certain jobs and employment opportunities and stuff. But it's possible with Donald Trump appointing a new justice that we may see the end of affirmative action, and a door of opportunity may be slammed in the faces of Black people. So this is a very real issue. And there are several people calling for Donald Trump to wait until after the midterm elections, because the makeup of the Senate may be different. And at that point, Democrats may be in a position to resist these nominations that Donald Trump puts forth. So when I get a chance, I will post a petition in the description box so that you all can sign that petition. And you should contact your senators and urge them to push for the president to wait until after the midterms before he decides to nominate, a Supreme Court justice to replace Justice Kennedy. And, I've talked about this on my personal Facebook page. I talked about the need for Democrats to vigorously fight against any of Donald Trump's nominations for the Supreme Court. They need to fight with every fiber in their being, fight against his appointments to the Supreme Court, just like those Republicans fought against Obama's appointments to various federal benches and to the Supreme Court. Those Republicans prevented Obama from appointing Judge Merrick Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court. And because of that, we have Justice Gorsuch in place right now. And that has had a devastating impact on the court. I mean, you saw a decision, dealing with voting rights in Ohio, moving in a direction that's contrary to voting rights. At a future time, I plan to thoroughly discuss that case. You have union rights being undermined because of, that vote that Gorsuch is making on the Supreme Court. Many of these key cases are split 5-4. And that one justice is making a huge impact on the direction of the court. See, it was because those Republicans fought Obama's nomination that they were able to get Gorsuch into place. And the Democrats need to be fierce. They need to stand up to Donald Trump and fight back against, any kind of nominations he makes. I don't care if these people are moderate or whatever, because Obama put forth a moderate justice, and those Republicans still fiercely fought the appointment of that justice. And that's the same kind of attitude that the Democrats need to have if they want to prevent this nut, Donald Trump, from completely moving the Supreme Court far to the right. Many basic rights we take for granted could end up being, eliminated with this appointment. So, so that's something to really think about, man. It's just important to realize that elections actually matter. Elections determine who's going to be on the Supreme Court. They determine who's going to be your attorney general. They determine who's going to be appointed to these various government agencies like the Board of Education, the Housing and Urban Development, all these different institutions. So this is very important. So I'm going to look over your comments real quick before I proceed to the next topic that I wanted to raise in this quick live stream. So Philip Scott said, you don't think they would actually end it? That would be crazy. I think we're moving backwards through time sometimes. Exactly, that's what's happening. That's what happens when people don't get engaged in the political process, when they allow a Donald Trump to be elected president, a man who has zero political experience, a man who's made it abundantly clear that he doesn't care about the interests of African-American people. So he's going to appoint like one of these far-right justices. And, these Democrats, I don't even know if they have the will to fight. I don't know if they had a will, but we need to make sure that we put pressure on our elected officials to fight against Donald Trump's nominations, because these people could have a devastating impact that will last far beyond Donald Trump's term in office. Yeah, they mentioned some of the picks that he has in mind in some of the articles. I may post some of them in the description box. Shout out to Ghostwriter. Somebody asked if Obama could be appointed to the Supreme Court. It's possible, but, it won't happen under Trump. There's no way Trump would appoint Obama to be a Supreme Court justice. What needs to happen is the people need to vote out Donald Trump. And each and every one of you needs to vote in the midterm elections. If you are not registered to vote, you need to register to vote tomorrow. And you need to educate yourself about all the candidates that are running. Know who's running for, your Congress, congressional representative. Know who that is. Know who's running for Senate. Do your research on these people. And find out if they are in support of things that matter to you and that matter to Black people. It's very important, man, because if we don't vote in these midterms, we could have a situation that's even worse than it is now, where you have even more Republicans in Congress, pushing through Donald Trump's right-wing agenda. Yeah, Elaine Lloyd said the Democrats aren't the majority and they won't fight. Unfortunately, you may be correct. I know that they're not the majority. The question is, will they fight? Will they push hard enough to ensure that there is no nomination or appointment until after the midterms? Because that can make a huge difference. Because if these elections go in a direction that many people predict, it's possible that the Democrats could win back the House, they could win more seats in the Senate, and they could actually have some kind of impact on this nomination process, and they can possibly prevent some of Donald Trump's nominations from going through. So Elaine Lloyd said Trump said he wanted to get rid of abortion, and he will find someone to do that. Yeah, and Covina Man said when Black people can't tell the difference between Trump and Obama or Clinton, dangerous consequences will happen. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true, because you have these ignorant people that want to pretend like the Democrats and the Republicans are one and the same. You know, they want to pretend like there's no difference between these parties and between these candidates. And by doing so, what they do is they encourage people not to vote. You know, they encourage people to sit back at home and not vote for these, you know, these important positions in the Senate and in Congress. And all that does is undermine Black political power. While these people preach about the need for Black power and independence, they undermine it by discouraging African Americans to exercise their right to vote, a right that our ancestors and elders fought and died for. So I think that that's a valid point. There's a clear distinction between these parties. You know, I'm not completely satisfied with either party or anything like that. You know, I'm not a fan of some of the decisions that Democrats make, but we cannot pretend like these two parties are one and the same, because they are not. So Elaine Lloyd said a lot of people don't know who's running or what they stand for and don't care about politics, so they vote for the person they hear about the most. Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. A lot of people are uninformed. They don't keep up with the issues. You know, some people are more knowledgeable about sports than they are about politics. They can tell you about all the stats for this basketball player or that football player, but they can't tell you who their congressman is. They can't tell you who their member of the city council is. They can't tell you who is the state's attorney in their community. They can't tell you these basic things. Some of them don't even know who the senator is. They don't know much about the mayor and all that kind of stuff. They don't know the basics, but they can tell you all this trivia about these sports figures. You see this in the barbershop. These brothers have all this knowledge when it comes to these trivial things like sports or entertainment. But when it comes to things that actually impact their lives, like politics, they don't know anything about that. And that brings me to the next topic that I want to talk about, and that's this election that took place in New York, where you had this young Latina woman by the name of Alexandria Cortez, who defeated a long-term congressman by the name of Joe Crowley. And when I get a chance, I'll post a link to her political ad in the description box so that you can watch it. This woman is a Democratic socialist. She ran for the Democratic nomination, and she defeated Representative Crowley. Now, this guy was a part of the establishment. He had the support of the establishment. This man was next in line to succeed Nancy Pelosi, according to speculation. So this was an influential man. He received a lot of donations. He had far more money than Alexandria Cortez, but he was defeated. And one of the things that she talked about in her campaign is she said that this man receives all this money from these corporations, the same corporations that support Donald Trump. She said that this boils down to the people versus money. And this is a prime example of how someone can actually defeat these politicians, despite the fact that some of these politicians have all this wealth and all this influence. They have all this support from corporate America. These people can be defeated if the people are organized. If you have organized campaigns that have a clear focus and a mission, you know, they can defeat these corporate Democrats. they can defeat these moderate Democrats, these right-leaning Democrats that are virtually, in many ways, similar to these Republicans. These people can be defeated, and the people can take over the Democratic Party. The progressives can take the Democratic Party from these corporate Democrats. That's the potential that we have here. This woman, from what I understand, was supported by Bernie Sanders. Again, you all know that I supported Bernie Sanders during the primaries, during the presidential primaries. I supported him. You know, I stood in support of him. I said that it was Bernie or bust, and I stood by that. And during the general elections, I voted for Jill Stein over Hillary Clinton for all the reasons that I've talked about before. But we have the potential to reshape our politics. We have the potential to not only just fight against the power structure by demonstrating, by protesting, by using social media. We have the power to actually seize power, to take over these positions of government and redirect the government, create reform in this society. We have that potential. And this is a prime example of somebody realizing that potential. And it's likely that she will win the election because that's a Democratic stronghold from what I understand. So we have the power to fight against the establishment, to seize power from the establishment. And we need to harness that power. We need to focus that power and focus our energy. We need to look for progressives to run for office and support those progressives, support them with our money, support them with our labor by volunteering for their campaigns. Because as long as we just accept business as usual, as long as we just accept these corporate Democrats in their moderate stands and their pro-corporation positions, then we will have more of the same. We need change in this society. And the only way we bring about change is by actually seizing power from the people who maintain the status quo. So, I commend this young woman. She's only 28 years old. She defeated this congressman who had been in power for like 19 years. We got too many of these politicians who are nothing but career politicians. That's all they do is maintain a certain position for years upon years without making a difference in the people's lives. And that's one thing that this woman pointed out. She talked about how this guy doesn't even really live in that community. He's not of that community. He's not tied to that community. He more so identifies with the corporations that funded his campaign for years upon years instead of identifying with the hard working class people in that community, the people who were struggling in that community. This woman, advocates, single payer healthcare, healthcare for all, free education for people, free college education. Those are very important things. There is no reason why anybody should be paying for Medicare, for medical care. That should be a right. Every single citizen, regardless of their income, should be entitled to quality health care. It's a shame that in this society, you have people that are uninsured. You go to these European countries, these Western countries, and they provide health care for all of their citizens. But here we have a society that's driven by profit, that puts profits over people, and healthcare becomes an industry in which people are about enriching themselves instead of finding cures and solutions to various diseases that plague people. So, I think that that's a very important issue, the issue of healthcare for all people, the issue of free college education for all people. Because many of us, we graduate from college, we graduate from these universities saddled with all kinds of debt, making it difficult to pass on wealth to our children. So we need to get rid of this concept that only people that have all this money can get an education. The only way you can get an education is to go in massive debt. That has to change. And we have to support candidates like this woman Alexandria-Cortez. And again, I will post a link in the description box to her political ad, a powerful ad. Also, we have another progressive that actually won here in Maryland, Ben Jealous. He's the former president of the NAACP. He won the nomination for governor in Maryland. You know, that's a tremendous victory. You know, he was supported by Bernie Sanders. You know, he supports healthcare for all people. He supports free tuition for college education and all other kinds of progressive measures. He was one of the people who was instrumental in abolishing the death penalty here in Maryland. The death penalty, as you know, is a racist tool that's used against African American people. You know, disproportionately African Americans are the ones who receive the death penalty. And often there have been cases where people have been exonerated by DNA evidence after being convicted and sentenced to death. So there are all kinds of issues around that. So this is something to celebrate. Ben Jealous ran against the establishment. You know, the establishment supported this guy who was the county executive for Prince George's County, Rashawn Baker. You know, all of the establishment supported him. All the key Democrats, all the key people in key positions put their support behind Rashawn Baker. And despite all of that, despite him having probably more money than Ben Jealous, he still was defeated. And again, this is a reminder of the power of the people. When the people are organized, when the people are mobilized, when you have candidates that have a strong voice and a strong agenda, we can make a difference. We can elect people that are concerned about the people, that will bring about change in this society. And it reminded me of the song by the poet, the brother that has a poem, Gil Scott-Heron, who has the poem, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." But what you see with these progressives winning these elections is you see an actual revolution being televised. You know, I hope that these people stick to their principles. I hope that they actually fulfill their campaign promises and actually push for these fundamental and necessary reforms, because we need change. Because too often we have more of the same. We have these weak Democrats that go along to get along, you know, try to find the middle ground and all that kind of stuff, and don't create the kind of change that we need to see in society. So that's a positive development. It gives me hope in the future of politics. It inspires me. You know, and who knows, you may see your man new possibilities running for some kind of public office in the future, because I'm really inspired by these people, man. So I want to move on to a couple of other stories before I close out. And then first I'll look at your comments before I move on to the Antwon Rose tragedy. There have been some developments in that matter that I want to touch on real quick. So just bear with me a second. Yeah, so pro-woman Jay was just wondering why Kennedy couldn't hang in there for 2 or 3 more years. Is he ill? I don't think that he's ill. I haven't seen any reports that he's sick or anything like that, but he is 81 years old. And despite him being a swing vote on some cases, on some types of matters, he's still a conservative. He's a conservative justice. And he supports a lot of what Donald Trump is about. So he feels comfortable leaving his position. You know, he has faith in Donald Trump. I assume he has faith that Donald Trump will appoint the right person. And I don't know why he would have that kind of faith, but that's my understanding of the situation. If I'm not mistaken, Justice Kennedy ruled in favor of Donald Trump's travel ban and all that kind of stuff. A devastating decision, you know, and I plan to read that decision soon. And I plan to do a hangout just talking about some of these important Supreme Court cases. I want to talk about them in basic layman terms so everybody can understand what's going on. So you all look out for that. Hopefully I'll be able to do that sometime this weekend. But despite being tired, I said, let me power through and do this hangout, because I don't want time to pass and me not get around to doing this hangout. That's happened on too many occasions, and I want to, just get back on track with this channel. And I want to thank every single person that's tuning in, because it is late, but I appreciate your support. So Philip Scott said, what do you think about the socialists who got elected in New York City? Should socialism be an option for the Black man? Now, I already expressed my support for the woman, Alexandria Cortez. I support her candidacy. She's a democratic socialist. I don't have any issue with that or problem with that at all. A lot of times people don't fully understand what democratic socialism is about, but really it comes down to people over profits. It comes down to people having free medical care for all, regardless of their income, free education and other things. I don't have any objection to democratic socialism. The problem that I have is with this ruthless capitalist society in which we live, where profits drive everything, where policy is directed by the ruling class in this country, where you have the corporations and the wealthy controlling and dominating the politics. That's what I have a problem with. I have a problem with, 1% owning massive percentages of the wealth in this country. I have a problem with, the fact that we live in a wealthy country, but you still have poverty, you still have unemployment, you still have homelessness. Those kinds of problems shouldn't exist in a modern day society, in an advanced society. The wealth disparities, the fact that the United States is involved in these conflicts abroad over resources, involved in conflicts driven by corporate interests instead of actually being driven by the needs of the people, being driven by national security and things of that nature. So I don't have a problem with, the idea of sharing wealth, with sharing resources, to, making sure that all people are provided for, in terms of healthcare and basic social programs and things of that nature. So I don't have a problem with democratic socialism. If people study the Black Panthers, they will know what the Black Panthers were about when they tried to set up those free breakfast programs, when they tried to set up free healthcare programs in the community, Black liberation schools in the community. Those are positive things. So I don't have problems with any of that stuff. What I have a problem with is, this greedy, materialistic, capitalist society that doesn't value human beings, that places money and material things over human life. That's what I have a problem with. So overall, I support that woman, the sister, and I do consider her a sister, in the struggle, Alexandria Cortez. Again, I'll post a link in the description box. And that's one of the things that we have to realize, man. We need to realize the importance of coalition. And that's something that I've talked about before, because as long as, working people of different races are divided, they are conquered. As long as you have, the 1% dividing the people up along all these different lines and maintaining the system, you still have the system of oppression and exploitation that continues to move on. So that's what I have to say about that. Someone asked, don't you think it's the person instead of the party? Yeah, I mean, sometimes the person can make a difference. It is about the individual and their positions on the issues. That's very important. But we know that these political parties have positions on various issues. And it's about deciding which party is more aligned with your positions on the issues, which party is more aligned with your interests on particular issues. And I'm not one of these people that say that you have to vote for the Democrats or the Republicans, like those are your only choices. There are third party candidates, and they shouldn't be written off because they're third party candidates. Because as long as you write off third party candidates or progressives, all we will end up with is mediocre politicians that perpetuate the status quo. So we need to have more of these progressives elected, you know, whether they are Democrats or members of other political parties. It should be about the interests of the people. That's what we should put first and foremost. And electability is a factor that should be considered as well. So I'm going to go through these comments real quick. So Future 5001 said there's a difference between progressive Democrats and corporate Democrats. Exactly. So, you know, this Future 5001 says progressive Democrats equals Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Corporate Democrats equal Obama and Clinton. Yeah, I mean, there's validity to that point. I mean, in many ways, Obama, you know, he's a neoliberal, you know, in many ways, he is a corporate type of Democrat. And I've pointed out, even despite him being a corporate Democrat, I think that he has done great things that have been beneficial to the Black community. But make no mistake about it, he's not a radical. He's not a, you know, someone that's as progressive as a Bernie Sanders or somebody like that. So there is a distinction, and you know, I think that we need to realize that distinction. I think that we need more progressives in positions of power, because, for instance, Obama's Affordable Care Act, while it's a step forward in terms of ensuring millions of people who did not have insurance, it's a step forward in terms of providing coverage to those people who would have been prevented from having coverage because of pre-existing conditions. It is not as progressive as a system of single payer, which would have ensured that all people had free and quality health insurance and health care. You know, but when you're in a position like president, you got to make sure that, you know, whatever legislation you're trying to put forward, you have to make sure that you have the votes to make it happen. So even if you have grand ideas about you know, a sense of single payer, that idea means nothing if it can't be enacted. And that's something that, like, pragmatists, you know, like people who are pragmatic, like Obama, realized. So they often take the middle route and stuff like that. And there are pluses and minuses to that, which I could go into in another video in more detail. So Tina said she was proud that she won, you know, that Alexandria Cortez won. I was too, man. It really inspired me, man. It inspired me. It gave me hope that people can make a difference, that we are not like obligated to vote for these moderates, these corporate Democrats. We have alternatives that are viable. So Elaine Lloyd said that she was super excited about her winning. It was a good surprise. And Tina said that example shows our votes count. Yeah, and that's another thing with those corporate Democrats. Like, you know, they support the Zionist agenda, you know, in terms of Israel. They unconditionally support Israel and stuff like that. And we need people in power that will challenge Israel, will challenge, you know, AIPAC and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, there are very few politicians that have the courage to do that. Even some of these progressives don't have that kind of courage, because they know if they go against AIPAC, that AIPAC will pour in resources to their opponents to make sure that they're defeated. Yeah, so I see a lot of people agree that we need progressive candidates. So I see Covina Man said politics is a winner take all. These white supremacists are all unified with Trump, but Democrats and progressive ran multiple candidates in the general elections, canceling each other out. And that's how we got Trump. Now, I mean, let's be clear. I mean, the Republicans had a whole bunch of candidates running for president. I mean, there were a lot of people running against Donald Trump. You know, establishment Republicans ran against him. But because you had the Tea Party movement and you had the alt-right, you know, people that were to the far right, they made it possible for Donald Trump to be elected. And I think that when the progressives are energized, they have the power to make sure that progressives get elected. I don't think that we should just take a position that any Democrat will do, you know, that we need to just focus on the quote unquote electable Democrats, because all that gets us is more of the same. I couldn't in good conscience vote for Hillary Clinton, given her history, when it comes to the crime bill, when it comes to welfare reform and other very important matters. I couldn't vote for her in good conscience. And I think that we do need to hold these Democrats accountable. We can't just vote for them just because they're Democrats, just because they're the lesser of two evils. We need to press them to advocate positions that are beneficial to working people, to Black people, to, you know, other groups of people who are marginalized in this society. But I mean, I understand your point. Like, I mean, anybody would have been better than Donald Trump. Just about anybody. Hillary Clinton would have been better than Donald Trump. Donald Duck would be better than Donald Trump, man. Mickey Mouse would be better than Donald Trump. So I get your point, though. I feel you, but I really think we need to push more progressives to run for office. We need to, if we don't see candidates that are progressive enough, we need to be the ones running for office. We need to seize power. That's what we need to do. We can no longer just sit back and let other people make important decisions for us. You know, we've said it before. You've heard the saying before. We are the ones that we're waiting for. You know, we want to look for, find a savior. We need to look in the mirror, because we're the ones that can make a difference in the society. Even if we're not actually running for office, we need to be the ones selecting people to run for office, supporting those who actually are progressive, that actually want to make a difference in this world. Yeah, so I'm gonna move on to this Antwon Rose situation. As you all know, in East Pittsburgh, this brother was stopped by the police. He was in a car. He got out of the car and he started to run from the police. A police officer by the name of Michael Rosefeld fired 3 shots at him, shooting him in the face, shooting him in the right elbow, and fatally shooting him in the back, killing him. This brother, Antwon Rose, was unarmed. He did not have a gun. He did not move towards the police in a threatening manner at all. And he was gunned down and killed by this police officer. This police officer served as judge, jury, and executioner. This brother, even if he was involved in some crime, as they allege, you know, they claim that he was in a car that was involved in some shooting or whatever. And they say that there were some guns recovered in the vehicle, but there were no guns on his person. He did not have a gun. He was unarmed. He was running from the police. He didn't pose a threat to the police, but the police officer gunned this brother down in cold blood. His hands were empty at the time. He had nothing in his hands. So the DA has charged this officer with criminal homicide. It's my understanding that there's been a bail placed of, I think it's like $250,000. So he will be tried for this crime. I don't know if he's going to be convicted. You know, I don't have much faith in the criminal justice system when it comes to convicting these police officers. We've seen time and time again charges being brought against police officers, and these police officers getting away with murder. First of all, in most of these cases, no charges are filed at all against these officers. And then when charges are actually filed, often these officers walk away from the trial getting away with murder, not being convicted, not spending a day in jail for killing Black people. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happens here. I mean, we saw what happened here in Baltimore with Freddie Gray. His brother's neck was shattered to pieces. The brother was killed, but not one of those police officers were held accountable. We see what happened with Eric Garner, a brother choked to death, and no charges were brought against the officer that killed that brother. And it happens time and time again. So I wouldn't be surprised if this officer does not get away with murdering this brother, Antwon Rose. And I think the people there need to keep up the pressure. They need to continue to protest. They should not be pacified with this decision to bring criminal charges against this officer. They have to keep up the pressure. They have to. And a lot of people have tried to demonize this young brother, criminalize this brother. And again, I don't know if he was involved in this crime or not. The police claim that they recovered, guns in the car, and they claim that he had a clip in his pocket or whatever. That's what they claim. But we know the history of the police of planting evidence on people, planting guns on people. So you don't know. I don't know if he actually committed any kind of crime ahead of time. And even if he did commit a crime before the police stopped him, that did not give the police the right to serve as judge, jury, and executioner. That brother had every right to be tried before a court of his peers instead of being summarily gunned down in the streets. So that's what I think about this situation. And also, this brother, according to all reports, volunteered in the community. He volunteered for the Free Store. That's a store that gave away free things to the people. This brother was an honor student from what I've seen in reports. So I don't know about this story of alleging that he was involved in a crime. That's suspect to me. And again, even if he was, that didn't justify the police officer's action. And the DA concluded that Rose being in that car did not make him a party to the crime. So that's very important. The DA is basically saying that Rose did not participate necessarily in this alleged criminal activity that other people in the vehicle may have participated in. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm going to conclude by talking about Maxine Waters and her situation. But before I do that, I'm going to look at your comments real quick, and then I'm going to proceed to bring up that last point. But I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I know it's super late. I need to get to sleep so I can be ready for my work day tomorrow. Yeah, so someone noticed that they said a few of them don't support the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Yeah, there are a few politicians that do speak out against that, which is very important. Oh, so Tina asked, where will the money come from to finance everyone's secondary education? That's a good question. That's a very good question in terms of different states. But the United States wastes money on so many different things. I mean, if you look at all the billions upon billions of dollars that go to the state of Israel, if you look at all this money that's wasted on corporate welfare, all this money that's wasted on a wide range of things, the United States can find the money to cover secondary education, to cover college education. I'm sure there was a time when people said, well, you can't cover high school education, or you can't cover middle school education. In some places in the world, The only education people can get is private education, even for elementary school and high school. So I think that where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, the United States wastes all kinds of money on military adventures, on occupying all these different countries. So I think that if they were focused, they can find the money to fund these things without a doubt. And a lot of these businesses, as Philip Scott said, they haven't paid their fair share in taxes in years. Businesses can be taxed, but that's one of the things that people worry about. They fear that if you tax the businesses, then many of them will leave the U.S. and they will go to countries that have lower tax rates. But I think that what people should do is look to the models of what's happening in Europe, like how Europe is able to fund education and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. If the Europeans can fund free healthcare and education for their people, there's no reason why America can't. Being one of the most wealthy countries in the world, America can make it happen. It's just a matter about it's just a matter of the people having the courage to demand that it happen, to make sure that it happens. Landlord said that would be great if he ran for something. That's something that I've thought about a lot, and it's something that I may eventually do. And so people are saying that tax the income on multinational corporations like Apple, Google, General Electric. There are billions there. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of companies that can be taxed, and that's one way to finance, public education, on a college level, and Medicare for all. Yeah, I heard about that, Philip. Like, I heard about Harley Davidson closing. I mean, a lot of these people that support Donald Trump, one of the main points that they raise is they say, well, he's bringing jobs and this and that to America and stuff like that. They talk about the low unemployment rate in the Black community. But with these tariffs, we're going to see the consequences of that. It's going to have an impact on the American economy if he doesn't come to his senses and get rid of those tariffs. Because we saw what happened with Harley Davidson, as you were pointing out in the chat room. Yeah, Future 5001 says Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have spoken against Israel. And I've heard Bernie Sanders say some things against policies in Israel. I haven't heard Elizabeth Warren make those kind of statements, but perhaps if I do more research, I'll be able to find her making those kind of statements. But unfortunately, too many of these politicians are just cowards, man. They don't have the courage to talk about these issues. Oh, so Pro Woman Jay said, yeah, do that hangout about court decisions. Yeah, I am going to do that. Hopefully this weekend I'll be able to start reading some of those decisions. Because there have been at least 3 different important decisions that have been issued by the Supreme Court that I want to talk about. I want to talk about a voting rights case in Ohio that they ruled on. I want to talk about that travel ban. And I also want to address that decision dealing with unions and its impact on working people. Yeah, so Tina said if an American company moves their business to another country, strengthening their economic growth, that company should lose their citizenship. Yeah, running away is not a valid reason to get shot. I mean, there are some cases that I cited in my last video. I think it's Tennessee versus Garner that talks about the circumstances under which it's lawful for a police officer to shoot someone who's fleeing. that person has to pose a there has to be a probable cause that that person poses a threat to the police officer or to someone else before the police can fire upon that person and kill that person who is fleeing. I mean, here you have an unarmed man, young man, only 17 years old from what I recall, who didn't pose a threat to these police. But it's going, they're going to probably raise the issue of like what a reasonable police officer would think, given the fact that there was a report of a shooting and there is a report that the vehicle was involved in the shooting and this and that. So I'm really skeptical about like the outcome of that case. The case involving the death of Antwon Rose, but we'll see what happens. But I think that we should still advocate for the brother. Yeah, they are saying that he had a gun clip in his pocket. But that's not a gun, and that's definitely not a reason to shoot and kill somebody. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this last issue, and that deals with Maxine Waters. Maxine Waters has come under fire because she's made some statements about Donald Trump's administration. She basically said that if people see members of that administration in public, they should confront them and, speak out against them. She was not encouraging any violence against members of the Trump administration. She was talking about protesting against these people. That's what she was talking about, not violence. But because of that, people have said, well, she's encouraging violence against members of the Trump administration. And now she is being threatened. She's receiving threatening messages from people. And because of that, she had to cancel 2 appearances that she had planned. She planned to go to Alabama and to Texas, but because of these threats that she has received, she has not gone forward with those appearances. She's decided to cancel them. And that just makes me, it just outrages me that this woman has to be subjected to these threats. And, we should support this sister. We should stand by this sister. We should defend this sister, because now you have even Democrats throwing the sister under the bus. Democrats like Nancy Pelosi. We need to stand with this sister. This sister is standing strong against Donald Trump's buffoonery and, his disgraceful conduct. And I have to commend her. So simply because she said that members of his administration should be confronted and they should be told that they're not welcome, because of that, she's come under fire. But I stand with this sister. I support this sister, and they better not lay a hand on this sister. In LA, they have, these gangs, the Bloods and the Crips and all that kind of stuff. They go hard on one another. They don't have any problem killing one another. But do they have the courage to fight for Black freedom? Do they have the courage to defend this sister and protect this sister? This sister deserves to be protected. The Nation of Islam, they should be protecting this sister. Any organization that's about Black empowerment, they need to stand with this sister and defend this sister and protect this sister. If the government's not protecting her, we need to be the ones protecting her. If you got Donald Trump, low-key encouraging threats against this woman, then we have to be the ones to protect her. We have to stand with this woman in solidarity with this woman, because she is right when she calls out this Trump administration for its ridiculous conduct, for its ridiculous positions on issues that matter to Black people. So I stand with this sister. I support this sister, and I will use this platform to defend this sister at every opportunity that I get. And we need to support this sister as well, all of you. But but I want to thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to look through your last bit of comments before I close out. Shout out to everyone in the chat room. Shout out to Elaine Lloyd. Shout out to Philip Scott. Shout out to Tina. Shout out to Future 5001. And everybody else in the chat room. Shout out to Pro Woman J. All right, so I'm going to get to your comments. before I close out. So Tina says she wonders what type of instructions the jury is given not to find these people guilty. Yeah, it's just something else how these juries, just let these people get away with murdering black people. I mean, like one of the most disturbing cases was that Trayvon Martin case where you had that guy, George Zimmerman, literally get away with murder. And ever since then, it's been abundantly clear that George Zimmerman is the real thug. He is the one that's been charged on multiple occasions for attacking people, for assaulting people, and all kinds of things. And he has a recent case against them. It's just a shame, man, that kind of stuff happens, that these people literally get away with murder. And it's like, and they just walk away free. And there's no consequences for their actions. He shot this brother, Trayvon Martin, through the heart. And that brother just died. And the court system said, that's okay. They said, that's fine. It doesn't matter that you killed this black man, black boy at that. Because in this society, black lives mean very little. That was nothing but a modern day lynching. Here you had a young brother just trying to find his way home. And this guy decides to single him out, view him as suspect and up to no good, and harass this brother and follow this brother and confront this brother and end up killing that brother. But the jury was fine with that. They were okay with that. And it's crazy, man. It makes people lose faith in the political system. And that's why you have, riots that take place, because that's the voice, as Martin Luther King pointed out, the voice of the unheard. Yeah, that cop was fresh out of the academy. He had only been on the job for a couple of weeks, from what I recall, not long at all. And his first thing that he does, like as a police officer, is gun this brother down, take this brother out. Yeah, and a lot of people do that, Elaine. They try to make it seem like we're okay with crime. Nobody's okay with crime. Nobody condones like violence or criminal activity. But the police do not have the right to serve as judge, jury, and executioner. They don't have that right. It's up to a court to determine whether or not somebody is guilty. It's up to a court and a judge to decide what kind of sentence that person will receive. It's not up to some cop that takes it upon himself to like execute somebody summarily. Yeah, there are a lot of rednecks in Texas and Alabama. That's not safe territory at all. Yeah, Trump does always talk about attacking the media, fake news and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, he did get his wish, Future 5001, with the shooting. And you got that guy, Milo Yiannopoulos, um, encouraging violence against the media, and then having the audacity not to apologize. If that was a black man encouraging violence against the media, and a black man heeded that encouragement and actually committed violence against the media, they would have that person in jail right now. They would arrest not only the shooter, but they would arrest the person who allegedly incited that activity. But instead of that happening with this Milo Yiannopoulos, this man will probably receive more book deals and more speaking engagements and more media attention. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate your support, and I will be back up with content on this channel and also on my I Declare War channel. For those of you who have not seen my recent hangout on my I Declare War channel, I encourage you all to go over there and check it out, and also to subscribe to my I Declare War channel. If you go to my New Possibilities channel, you will see the I Declare War channel as a related channel. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. I hope that you have a good night and a great day tomorrow. Peace.